Warning: today's Hanime on Anime review will contain content that may be inappropriate for viewers under the age of 18. Viewers' discretion is advised. And if you're under 18 and you're still here, you're disgusting.
Greetings, fabulous people of the internet. I'm Hanime on Anime. And if you're wondering why I'm in such an unpleasant mood right now, well, let me enlighten you. If you will recall a certain joke that I made in my very first video review, start things off with a review on a show that has pretty much become one of my personal favorites and was hands down one of the best shows of 2018.
No, not that one.
Though I get the feeling that people are still gonna be talking about it. And another joke that I made in my Sound Euphonium review, I'll just say it has been considered to be one of the best shows of 2018, if not the real best show of 2018. Get off my screen, I'm gonna talk about you later. And then a certain rant in my more recent Violet Evergarden review. In fact, this show is so good, it should have won Crunchyroll's Anime of the Year for 2018. But it didn't. Why? Because there was no gore or violence or no, don't play that, there's no need. Well, if you've been wondering after all these jokes why exactly I made them, allow me to inform you of something that happened back in March during Crunchyroll's Anime Awards. Isn't it exciting? Hence, my mood. Why am I this way right now? Because people wouldn't shut up about this. All year, nobody wouldn't shut up about it. They were talking about how this was the best thing of the year. Oh my gosh. It was just the best thing ever! Bullcrap! This was not Anime of the Year material!
Okay, let me be perfectly clear with something in saying that. I liked Devilman Crybaby. Overall, I liked it. I liked its themes. I kinda liked the animation. And I do, in fact, like how it was very well received upon its release. Note, though, I said like. Because somehow when this show hit Netflix in the winter of 2018, people went nuts over it. Even going as far as to claim it as the best anime of the year, even before March hit. But from the very beginning, I didn't think this show deserved the Anime of the Year title that its popularity warranted, and the annoying amount of hype it got did not help when it came to my overall view on it. And despite the fact that Crunchyroll's Anime Awards was just 7 months ago, hey, if Anime America can do their award show in June, I can talk about this. I think it's time to finally put this crybaby to bed and settle once and for all what was good, what was bad, and why it was the farthest thing from Anime of the Year.
So, let's take a begrudging second look at today's show and get started with today's re-review on Devilman Crybaby.
The series focuses on Akira Fudo, a high schooler who...
Wait a minute! Netflix subscription in the first place. So why am I even bothering? Well, okay. This is Hanime on Anime. And be that as it may, I must do a synopsis. So, here we go. Wimpy teenager Akira Fudo gets possessed by a demon in a story about man being the real monster and the dangers of mob mentality, all wrapped up in a stupid plan about Satan getting back at God for casting him out of heaven. Done. Now let's get straight to the point here. What do I think of Devilman Crybaby after reviewing it twice 1 year ago? Well, over a year ago? Well, to keep myself from having another mental breakdown on camera, I am instead going to shout my response in one sentence in an attempt to create a jump scare. So, without further ado, come closer to the screen. Come on. Come on. Just a little closer. A little closer. Come on. And for good measure, turn up the volume. Come on. Come on. Right. Are you ready? Here we go. Devilman Crybaby was a rushed mess.
This was so rushed. The pacing of its story and characters was just awful. First off, did anyone stop binge watching this show to realize that none of the characters get any kind of decent development in this show? Yeah, seriously. Nobody has any clear depth or motivation. If there is any, it's either very shallow or brushed aside for all the gore and sex and what have you see throughout the show. Unless you're Rio, who's actually Satan. Yeah, Rio is the only character who gets any kind of dimension to him, but that's only because you find out in the final episode this was all about him being the reincarnation of Satan wanting revenge on God.
This was not the biggest problem that I had with the show, but it does bring up the question, why should we be interested in these characters if there's nothing interesting about them?
Akira, for instance, has no depth to him whatsoever. He doesn't grow or develop as the show progresses, and his motivations remain the same. He's a very static character. Not only that, after he's possessed by Amon, him being a crybaby feels way out of character sometimes. Now, when he's fighting, it makes sense because normally he's a pacifist who would avoid fighting at all costs. But then you have random moments where he just bursts into tears for no real reason.
Leading to scenes like... What is that? Seriously, what the heck is that? I mean, man, there is ugly crying, and then there's ugly crying. This is some grade A ugly crying here. Well, there's no doubt that Devilman Crybaby got the crybaby part down, because with scenes like this, yeah. No comment, let's move on.
Even Miki is the same way, sticking to her shtick of being this overly positive, borderline SJW social media star right up to her death. Any kind of opportunity to bring some depth or intrigue to these characters gets purposely pushed aside when humanity starts to turn, which starts at about episode 6.
And while we're on this topic, among the worst victims of this were two characters who at first had a lot of intrigue to them, but got little time to flesh that out. You know which side characters I'm talking about. Miko and Koda.
Miko, one of the girls on the track team, is something of an unspoken rival to Miki, as she has some considerable resentment towards her for being so popular that her own name got changed among other students. Yeah, I bet you didn't know they both shared the same first name. We clearly see this resentment from the beginning and know that it will come to blows at some point. But by the 9th episode, Miko, out of nowhere, seems to forgive her. Why? There's no possible way with that amount of resentment that you can simply let all of it go in one night off screen. It can't be done. But because of the big climax, move on, it gets rushed. The same can also be said about Coda, the gay track star who feels conflicted about his Devilman powers because they were responsible for the death of his boyfriend. We see from the beginning of his arc that he regrets being a Devilman and feels awful about it, again, given that it was the cause of death for his former partner. But once again, hitting the fast forward button to the big finale, he witnesses a fight between Akira and a group of powerful demons, and out of nowhere, he decides humanity is doomed and the demons are going to rule the world anyway. So I'm gonna side with them for the rest of the show. Westboro Baptist Church was right all along. This random decision makes no sense as it goes completely against Coda's feelings about being a Devilman. And it comes right the heck out of nowhere. But once again, the big climax, move on. Because the series wants to bullet point humanity's downfall to a dramatic end, the characters are left shallow and one-dimensional or have rushed backstories.
And speaking of climaxes, let's talk about what I had the biggest problem with when it came to Devilman Crybaby, the last episode. Good freaking Lord.
This episode had so much crammed into it, I can equate it to getting whiplash after riding a bad roller coaster. A really bad roller coaster. This final fight between the Devilman and Satan and his armies was an absolute mess, when it should have been the biggest moment in the series. This is supposed to be one of the most epic and apocalyptic fights depicted in biblical history, maybe even in all of literature. And I dare to argue human history, even though it, thank God, hasn't happened yet. It's the ultimate battle of good versus evil. But in Devilman Crybaby, we see it as a 7.5-minute montage. You've got to be kidding me.
This is one of the most apocalyptic battles, if not the apocalyptic battles of apocalyptic battles. And yet, it gets reduced to a 7.5-minute montage? Was Satan's introspection in this so important that we had to cut down one of the most epic battles ever recorded in human history to a side note?
Seriously, the content they quite literally throw at you could have been expanded into at least one more episode. But nope, we have to focus on Satan realizing he screwed this whole thing up by being a selfish prick. If this was so important, why not have the final moments of this series, aka Satan doing introspection, being the final episode? It could have worked. It could be like the final episode of Evangelion, but better.
On top of that, we saw so many characters who either needed closure or were just interesting characters who could have been expanded on.
I want to know more about Jenny, Rio's secretary who has no idea what a bra is. I want to know more about the other Devilman, like the track coach. Heck, I want to know more about this woman who spews demon breast milk. But the series treats them all like fodder. Why? Because the final episode is treated with so little care when it comes to tying all the loose ends that need to be tied up that by the end of it, you feel like something is missing. That is, of course, unless you're Satan. Then your story gets tied up in a nice, big, messy bow.
So yeah, rushed characters, rushed story, it was all rushed. And while I'm still considerably angry here, let's talk about this. And allow me to throw more considerable butt hurt your way, like a monkey throwing its own poo at the zoo. This was not earned either.
I'm not trying to take away any kind of merit or awards that Masaki Yuasa has earned as a director, and will openly admit that Devilman Crybaby is the only work of his that I've seen, and as you'll learn later, there are actually some good aspects to Devilman Crybaby as a whole. But let's be real here. How many of this guy's works are well known in the West?
In fact, let me take this opportunity to flash a few posters of this guy's work onto the screen. Now take a minute to pause and actually see if you recognize any of these works. See anything you recognized? No? Exactly.
Yeah, there's a reason why a lot of this guy's work is considered to be underrated, with having a modest fan base outside of Japan. These aren't works that bring casual watchers in. In fact, the only people that would probably know anything about this guy and the work he's done are the really hardcore otakus who are sick of the usual anime that comes out and want something different. But for those who like to mingle with the common anime folk, the artsy route may not be the most marketable route. I'd be willing to call directors like Hayao Miyazaki and Mamoru Hosoda as directorial geniuses because they know how to create works with great stories and animation that all people, casual fans or hardcore otakus, can enjoy and associate with anime, as well as do something unique. Yuasa, though he certainly has talent and a catalog of reputed works, hasn't gotten to a marketable point for the West. Again, Crybaby is the only thing that I've seen of his, but just looking at his previous works and how under the radar they are, this guy is not a genius. Honestly, I think he got lucky with Devilman Crybaby because it was airing on Netflix and because everybody has a Netflix subscription now. But even then, with all the problems I mentioned earlier, this essentially means that this guy's most popular title is his weakest and most problematic. And sure, you can blame Netflix all you want for these problems, but I'm standing my ground here in saying that the director is just as guilty. If this guy was the genius people say he is, then how come he couldn't make a show with great themes, with more well-rounded characters, and a great story with an epic battle?
Now that I've calmed down considerably, I know what you're thinking. I probably hate this show. Actually, if you weren't paying attention to the first few minutes of this video, I actually liked this show. In fact, I liked it a lot. And believe it or not, I liked it for the exact same reasons that everybody else liked it.
I honestly enjoyed the dark, nihilistic premise of the show, and it's something that I don't think has been done well to this extent in a very long time. There have been many dark anime shows to have come out over the years, sure, but I don't think any of them were this explicitly violent or bleak. The closest shows I can think of that pulled this off well were Berserk and Evangelion. So, to give him some credit, Yuasa did take a dark, gritty, 50-year-old manga and made it relevant to modern audiences. Granted, it bears more semblance to Devilman Grimoire than Go Nagai's original manga, but it still maintains the overall spirit. And while we're still on the topic of all things modern, I love how social media played a crucial role in the show, especially with humanity's downfall. It helps play on how it can move people for better and for worse. That scene where Miki makes the post defending Akira as a Devilman is one of the most beautiful moments in the series, next to the ending, which we'll talk about in a minute, and is one of the few in anime that have ever made me cry. This was also another ingenious move on US's part that makes the show relevant and, yes, good.
See? Yuasa may not be a genius, but he can throw in a few brilliant moves here and there. The characters and story may be rushed, but there are a few nice elements to the show that help it move along in the direction that it needs to go. Leading up to, and I'm just going to say it right now, my favorite ending in anime, period.
Sure, I've called the whole Satan versus God plot twist stupid, but despite that, it does give us one of the most poetic endings in anime, and is by far one of my favorite anime endings of all time. It's sad and bleak, but it wraps everything up in a pretty shocking way that you really don't see in anime that much. Despite the fact that Satan seemingly gets his way, for him to realize that he was so caught up in revenge that it ended up costing him everything was a clever twist in which God got the last laugh. This entire moment stole the show, and rightfully so. It had an age-old lesson presented in a modern way that anyone watching can understand. It's very subtle, but brilliant.
But on a funnier side note, and since this will be the third time I've mentioned Evangelion in this review, am I the only one that tried to find Rei's giant head in this scene? I mean, look at it. It just gives off the end of Evangelion vibes. Like, seriously, tell me you didn't try to, but I don't know. One of these days I think I'll... Wait. Oh, wait a minute! There it is! So majestic.
On a different note, while it's taken me some time to get used to, the animation was also pretty decent.
Sure, it's not my favorite, and sometimes I still feel like it allows itself to be lazy while going overboard with its sakuga. Can anyone say Scooby-Doo run or... Anyways, but overall, this animation style works perfectly for the series. The minimalistic art style allows the content to go all out with its content, but not go so far as to deter the audience. I certainly prefer the sharper and cleaner character design and animation, but because the show's cornerstones include intense moments of gore and violence, not to mention the sex and rape that happens, it would be too difficult to watch. Had it been more detailed, it would have been something like Berserk or Hellsing Ultimate. So, I can give it a pass.
And finally, one last element to the show that I thought was pretty interesting was Ryu, or Satan. Getting straight to the point here, Devilman Crybaby had, in my opinion, one of the most accurately depicted Satans I've ever seen in media, if you go by Christian lore.
Western culture often depicts Satan as this red-horned demon or a satyr. So it may come as a surprise to find that in Devilman Crybaby, Satan is depicted as an angel.
Now I know this sounds bizarre and to some Christians watching this blasphemous, but hear me out for a second. If you go by Christian lore, aka the Bible, this is actually pretty close to accurate.
To explain, the Bible never officially gave Satan a face or form. Satan, for the most part, is seen as more of this presence rather than an actual person or entity. He was merely a symbolic representation of evil. The depiction of Satan that we recognize today most likely comes from Western literature and not from the Bible. In fact, I would argue that the pieces of literature that probably gave us the definitive form of Satan were probably either Paradise Lost or Dante's Inferno.
Plus, also going by Christian lore, Satan used to be an angel. He was cast out of heaven after he tried to usurp God.
So in that regard, you could very well assume that Satan would keep his angelic form once he was cast out. But keep in mind too that Satan was a very different kind of angel. In fact, he was one of the highest ranking angels in the hierarchy of heaven, which, the higher up you go, start to look less like angels and something more like winged creatures. But still, it's strange, it's ominous, it's not what you typically depict as an angel, and it's even kind of creepy. Plus, add the name Satan, the Prince of Darkness, a name that for many millennia has been associated with all things evil, and this form becomes sinister. Again, this is very much a different take on Satan that might not sit well with some Christians, but speaking as a Christian myself, I actually welcome this interpretation of one of man's greatest enemies.
So yeah, after all the ranting I've done in this video, is Devilman Crybaby a good show? Absolutely. There is in fact a lot of good things in it, and I think it holds up decently well, and I do highly recommend it. I just don't think it was anime of the year.
While it has some great themes and some great lessons to take away, at the end of the day, it's painfully rushed and its characters are criminally underdeveloped. And I feel like people jumped on the hype train way too quickly to realize how sloppy the show actually was. It was good, but it was the farthest thing from anime of the year, and there were so many other shows that came out during the year that could have topped it. Violet Evergarden.
Oh, and Victoria Holden and the people at Crunchyroll, before you go insulting your well-informed fans and viewers, you probably need to consult some more well-informed judges who know what anime of the year material looks like. Because as I've said before, and will say it once again, Devilman Crybaby was impressive. But it was not anime of the year. Well, that wraps up today's review, I guess. Thanks so much for watching, but you know, it just hit me. I wasted all my time and all my material for this review. I literally have nothing else left for October. Absolutely nothing. I've wasted all of my time and effort on a rant. I need to go watch some good Netflix anime. Especially considering that November is coming up next month, which is appropriate. So, with that being said, stick around for November. Till next time, I need a break.